Hello. How's it going, everyone? Cool? All right. We're going to start lightning talks, and we've got Omar first.
Thank you, Jasper. So this is going to be so quick. This is Omar from edX. We do Arabic MOOCs in a nutshell. I'm going to talk to you today about how did we localize the math in our platform. So this is going to be more about the localized math rather than the platform, but the context is still within the edX platform. So here you see cryptic text, right? I'm sure most of you can't read that. This is the same for our students when they see that one. Semantics-wise, they're perfectly the same, but in terms of the syntax, you can see the difference. So why is this? I'm sure you know that math education is important, and the math scripts have been found as early as 4,000 years old. So despite the changes that have happened to the language now, English is the most, or let's say European scripts are the most common scripts found. However, students in the 22 Arabic countries are still K-12 learning the equations in Arabic, just like the one you saw. So how about the edX platform? So we're lucky to have MathStax already set up on the edX platform. So if anyone wants to display a beautiful equation, he would write the LaTeX for it, and it just shows it's beautiful and it works. What about Arabic? Oops, no support. MathStax only works on the European. So what's the alternatives? Some of us want to use Microsoft Word or like this one, handwritten and scanned, but it doesn't work. It's not really, maintainable. It's a mess. So that's why it took us a lot of time, but I'm going to go short on this. We developed a extension for MathStax that accepts the same LaTeX input and displays it in Arabic. It does a lot of things, including, it translates variables, function names, of course, the RTL. As you can see, the equal sign here, it's flipped on here. So this is the first part, the RTL, and the second part that every single symbol is almost translated. So what does the results look like? Of course, it has to be better than the handwritten one, right? So this is the English one, and this is the Arabic one. So this one is a screenshot from the actual renderer on the web. So this is not a photoshopped one or something like that. This uses the same text syntax that you can that you can use in any MathStax or LaTeX environment. So this is a slightly more complicated equation that I want just to test out the system that we did. So it's a meaningless equation as far as I can tell, but here you can see the LaTeX that the author writes. And typically the author is English literate, so that's not a problem. But we're more addressing the learner side of the problem. So and that's it for what have been done. And next steps. The current implementation is it's an extension, so we are planning to put it within the MathStax v3. Of course, the MathStax team has been very generous to review it for us and the extension and to suggest this implementation. The font is not really good. We need a better math font and perhaps support more languages like Urdu, Persian, and so on. There are multiple languages that could benefit from this one. I have an ambition that I could contribute to the Arabic version of Wikipedia, but that's a long way. Here are some links. This is the code. If someone wants to discuss it, I'm going to be available, so please feel free to reach me out. There is a math course that we use at edX, which uses this extension extensively. And as a bonus, I would like to invite you to see my Git OSPR repo. If anyone does a open source PRs for the edX platform, this might be really helpful. And these are our current edX platform that runs Jenkins like full 10 seconds. This is a bonus. This is not related to my question. And thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Leonardo Sanom from la Universidad Politécnica de Valencia. I'm here to talk about JavaScript tools to enhance language mocks. We have a problem to fix. That is, if you remember the old drag and drop problem, it has a problem with the mobile version of the platform that it has no touch controls. We thought about making an X block to fix this or improve the code, but we thought we have no time because the course was already running. So we thought that we can just inject JavaScript onto edX to fix the problem. The idea was quite simple because we just wanted to fix the touch input in this part of the code. Quite quick and dirty, inject the JavaScript, add the functionality, and go. And it worked. So after that, we thought on some quality of life change, because our students wanted to repeat the problems to do tests, and afterwards repeat and repeat. So this way they can approve the real exam. So if you work with a platform, you have a reset button downside, but when you answer correctly, the reset button disappears. It was a problem because we wanted it to be reusable by everybody so they can retrain. And what we did is the same. Inject that JavaScript into edX. And yeah, the reset button keep there even if the problem was already correctly done. So what's next? Actually, this is kind of a problem because when you have a problem set, you have a set of problems. Every problem has his own reset button. And as you know, it can be tedious. Oh, I want to repeat the test. Reset, reset, reset. It's not comfortable. So more injection of JavaScript, we created a reset all button. So instead of resetting every button on his own, the students just press once, reset all the exam. We keep doing this because we keep comfortable with the way the platform behaves, and my boss liked the quick work. So after this, we decided to add functionality. So when you are on a language course, you can have a problem because the speaking or the listening, si os hablo en español, puede pareceros muy rápido, porque because the tempo maybe it's not good for you to listening. And we made a quick tool that on there we have an HTML5 audio tool, and we added a slide with JavaScript that controls the tempo of the audio file. So this way, it was kind of easy for the students, make it slower. It controls tempo and pitch, so it doesn't sound weird. And this way, the students could listen slowly how it pronounces and make it easier the learning. So this worked well. The students were happy, and we tried a little bit more. This time, we did a pronunciation exercise. Our whole idea was the students listen to some recording. Afterwards, they record themselves and listen to themselves. This is nice because I don't listen to myself the same way that I listen a recording of myself. Maybe I think I'm pronouncing correctly, but obviously not. So this was nice. So that's it. If you have any question. Yeah, without that, since this is kind of dirty, we are providing a blog with all these little sketches. So I'll post in the forums or the community so you can access to it. Yeah, you're welcome.
Hi, my name is Pierre Mayotte. I'm from the Université de Montréal, and we'll talk about building a multilingual platform. First, a context. EduLib is the only Francophone education consortium in North America. It's a joint venture between Université de Montréal and two of its associated schools, which are the Business School, HEC Montréal, and the Engineering School, Polytechnique Montréal. And we still have more partners coming up that will be running courses on our platform. The problem is that when we decided to run edulib first, we only wanted to have courses in French. So the platform was unilingual in French. Running a unilingual platform is easy because everything is only in one language. But if you have problems, for example, text that is not translated, you simply hard-code it in your fork or in the code, and then it gets in your language automatically. English is easy, for example, because you have nothing to do. But if you want to have French, then you run into examples where you need to use transifex for the translations, you need to share translation between FR and FR Canadian because there are differences in some technical terms. There are problems with Unicode, for example, because if you have a piece of text that would have accented characters, then sometimes the code doesn't support Unicode. So I included a lot of PRs over the years. So there was, and then you have to decide, do you fix it only in your fork or do you push it again to the main code? Then you have to translate informational page like the about page, the FAQ, the honor code, and all these questions. So you have to have a page in English and a page in French. X-blocks. That has been one of my major problems. For example, sometimes there is supposed to be some code to internationalize X-block. It doesn't work. For example, for UBCPI, we had to clone the fork, create a French branch and an English branch, and then that means that depending on the course, you use either the French or the English version. But then you have to modify the code extensively because you need to have the differentiation so that the X-blocks are unique. Then you need to rework everything. So that really does work well in some cases, but in others, like drag and drop v2 and active table, it didn't work at all. Certificates. We are still using PDF certificates. And in the code, if you use the PDF certificate, some of the terms are hard-coded. So we needed to replace the places where the code, the English nomenclature was, so that we had to create PDF templates that were language agnostic, so that depending on the course, we would add the parts in French or the parts in English. Templates. That's another issue, because some of the templates, you've got the original text in English. But if you want to support English and French, then you might need to rewrite the English templates. And if you rewrite the English templates, then there is no longer any translation in transifex or in the Django or Django script, JavaScript files. So at that point, you have to create your own translation and add them into your files and then recompile the messages and everything. Scientific notation and dates. in Canada, at one point, we switched from the English system to the metric system. So there's always the problem between the comma and the period. And one of our first courses was an engineering courses. And the teachers, the first time they saw it, they said, oh, but we wanted to use the comma. No, you can't. Browser avoids profile language. For example, we want the users to have a great experience in French and English. So we have to make a provision so that they can access the site in their own language first through the browser, and then they go through the user preferences. But that has some very interesting consequences at one point, because sometimes you will end up with a page in both English and French. We also translated the powered by edX logo so that we would have it in French, but then we ended up with a new problem. How do you switch it to French to English whenever the user is? And at one point, we had discussed it yesterday, maybe we could have a buff discussing things about internationalization, and we're always available to discuss any topics we may have touched upon in that presentation or not. And these are our contacts and questions. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to this lightning talk. My name is Anisha. I work at UQX. This talk is entitled edX, XBlock versus LTI. So at UQX, we make a lot of MOOCs. We have a catalog of 30 MOOCs, and we continuously run these MOOCs in either self-paced or paced mode. We're a large team. We're about 15 people. We've got project managers, learning designers, video producers, and we have a dev team of 3. So as you can imagine, we make a lot of learning and teaching tools for our courses. We try to make them interactive and engaging. This is just an example of a tool where we teach a student how to participate in an emissions trading scheme. This tool is embedded in our Carbon 101X course. So a tool like this is really very domain specific. So it'll only ever be used in one course. And we use LTI to do this. However, we also make tools that can be applied to any number of courses. So this particular tool here is a ranking poll. And the way it works is students are given some things to review. So in this case, it's applicants for a job interview. They can rank these applicants and then also see how other students in the class have ranked these applicants. So we've used this in our psychology course and also in our carbon course, where what students were ranking were projects that they wanted to invest in. We also have a reflective journal, which is reused in a couple of our courses. So the thing with the last two examples that I've shown you here is that they're reusable, and we're doing them all as LTIs. Now, the reason we do them as LTIs is because it's hard to get an XBlock deployed really fast in time for our MOOC release dates on edX.org. What LTIs allow us to do is to add things when we want to. and also fix them when we want to. However, there's a large community with supporting Xblocks and also a large community deploying open edX installations. And we believe some of our tools can really benefit this community. So the solution really is, I've been trying to think of a solution to this problem, and it's to actually try to combine Xblocks with LTIs. So if we can take an Xblock, put it in an LTI, and then plug that into edX.org, we still get the functionality of the Xblock, we get the functionality of an LTI, and we also can deploy our Xblocks to any other LMS. So on campus, we use Blackboard. So as you can imagine, we not only want our tools to be used on edX, we also want them to be used on Blackboard. So the technical solution to this problem that I've been working on actually uses a Django LTI tool provider. I looked around for a lot of them. The one I've settled on actually is really tightly integrated with Django. So it's got a auth backend, it's got middleware, it lets us have decorators to define the role to access our views, and we can get the LTI data straight from the request object. And I've taken the Xblock dev workbench runtime and embedded it inside the LTI container. What does that look like? The Xblock will display in an LTI. We actually have an edit Xblock, which gives us the ability to give a name, a description, which resource IDs are coming from the LMS. But we can also select different Xblocks and then edit the XML. So you can think of it as any Xblock I've installed, I can embed anywhere else, and it's very instance-based. So lots of polls, lots of reflective journals all over the course you can use with this tool. Going forward, really the things are improve the state management by using Postgres and JSON field, because at the moment it's stored in a text field inside the workbench. Django auth LTI doesn't have grade sending. It's built really wonderfully, but there's just one thing missing. I've also got to figure out how to get whether the answer is correct or incorrect from the Xblock, and can I get a UI and better CSS styling inside my own project. And that's really it.
Yeah, it works. Okay. Hi guys, I'm Eugenie Kolpakov. I'm working at OpenCraft, and I'm gonna tell you about edX cookie cutter templates. So this is, our logo and my contact information. Yeah. So this is how I usually feel when we got to, start new project from scratch, because we need all those developer tools like version control and build automation and continuous integration and tests and style checkers and so on. And the thing why I'm feeling like that is because all of that tools are basically a decision to make and some configuration to write. And I'm not even talking about DevOps stuff like Docker and Ansible and stuff. So, problem. Development tools require a lot of configuration up front and a lot of decisions up front, and it's tedious and ungrateful task. Can we do better? So since I'm talking about that, there is a solution. The solution is named software scaffolding. So you actually, if you've done some development on Django, you actually met that before, because Django admin start project is exactly what it is. It scaffolds your new project, and there's a command line flag -- template that allows you to specify your own template and scaffold the project with your stuff. So, but really it is tied to Django, and people went on and created a lot more true stuff, software scaffolders like listed here. So I'm gonna talk about cookie cutter in this talk. So basically, cookie cutter is a Python scaffolder tool written in Python and mostly for Python. It is language agnostic, so people doing scaffolding for other languages like Scala, Haskell, PHP, and whatever. But mostly it is popular within Python community. So, I don't know, does it work? Yeah, so Usually, cookie guard template look like this. So there's a cookie guard repo name in double curly braces, and cookie guard JSON. I don't know if you guys can see it, but I've just told that. So cookie guard repo name is just a Jinja2 template in a file system of Jinja2 templates, and cookie guard JSON specifies questions you need to know. Cookie guard will ask you. So this is how typical cookie cutter session look like. I'll give just important stuff is you run cookie cutter here, you install it, run cookie cutter on either local file system or GitHub repository. It asks you some a list of questions, and it scaffolds your project. So edX went on and created 3 different cookie cutter templates. The first one is Django IDA template. IDA stands for Independently Deployed Application, if you haven't crossed that acronym yet. So I believe you can read that, but the most important stuff is pep and pylint config, Travis integration, and Sphinx. The next one is Django application template. So it is a little bit more richer because it started roughly at where IDA was, but we used that template to scaffold edX enterprise project, and we shared back some lessons learned. So this is mostly the same stuff. Important additions is adding test infrastructure, code coverage, and GitHub integration. So whenever you submit a pull request on GitHub, it starts with a certain template. So you don't have to, went to other previous GitHub pull requests and copy it. And the last one I'm going to talk about in, a minute, XBlock template. So basically, this template is what I used for my workshop 2 days ago. I hoped it would be in the reverse order, so I'm going to do a lightning talk and then invite everyone to the workshop, but it didn't happen. So this one is a little bit less rich than other ones, so there are no code style checkers and static analysis tools and so on, but it's very useful still because it contains setup.py, which is really hard to figure out on your own, and XBlock project layout. That's it. Thank you very much.
And that is. Hello, everyone. My name is Miguel, and I don't have a very ambitious talk. I'm just trying to show you how you can deploy separate, independent applications on OpenEdX that take advantage of the edX user accounts. So it's interesting because we want to develop many kinds of new dashboards, new kinds of websites that still don't ask the users to create an account or log in again. If you've used Insights or e-commerce, for example, you notice that they don't ask you to register again. They pull your data right from OpenEdX as expected. So this is great. This is part of edX's plans. If you've noticed lately and for a long time, many of their new components have been deployed independently of edX/edX platform. So e-commerce and Insights are 2 examples, but this is happening more and more. And this is great, right? What we're going to do is we're going to see how we can extend this for our own. So aside from Insights and e-commerce, a couple of other use cases would be customized administrator dashboards, if not instructor dashboards. And there are always new ideas. So for example, an instructor news feed as to what has been happening in each course, right? Who are the most active students? What are the new answers to the problems, etc. Insights, just so you know, this is what I mean. It's a separate website with a login feature, as you can see on the top, but that login is against edX platform. So in short, how does this work? Basically, in order to achieve single sign-on, we want to use edX platform's data. We want to reference it. We don't want to copy it. Obviously, Insights doesn't have a copy database of accounts. That wouldn't make any sense. And we want to achieve single sign-on and single sign-out. How does this work? Well, pretty much OAuth, right? So you have a provider, which is edX platform, and then you have a number of clients, of which Insights and e-commerce are 2 examples, but again, there are many more. Just simple OAuth, you go on the provider, you register a client, for which you get a client ID and a client secret, and once that client has those credentials, you can go back to edX and say, edX, here are the credentials you gave me, give me an access token. And that access token is what allows it to request and post other stuff. Obviously, on OpenEdX, we have the admin dashboard through which we can add, OAuth clients. If you've done the mobile apps or Insights, you see that this is, I'm sure you've seen this before. So there's something else that has to happen because OAuth doesn't really tell you who the user is, right? If we just stick with OAuth, then Insights or whichever other separate website is not going to know who is making these requests, right? OAuth, out of the box, as in client ID and client secret in exchange for an access token, is great because it gives you that data, but the edX platform would have no idea who is requesting it. By the way, the access token, as part of OAuth, doesn't really tell you this information either, and the client has no way of deciphering this. The OAuth standard goes more into this, but it's, the solution here is that we have to supplement OAuth with something else, right? Something that takes the standard OAuth flow and adds in these user credentials. So user credentials, as well as maybe some information pertaining to the expiration of the access tokens. OpenID Connect is this external component, and this is what edX uses, right? So OpenID Connect essentially builds on top of OAuth. It takes their client IDs, their secrets, and access tokens, and just adds a user identifier, right? That user identifier can carry a lot of information about the user, but that's essentially what it is. Great. How does edX do this? Well, they have another repository called Auth Backends. It's right on GitHub, and this is where they have defined an additional authentication service, which, as you know, is great for Django, right? Django allows you to specify additional authentication services, relatively easily. You define a class, you define a couple of methods, and you import it into your client. So how does that work? Well, first of all, you have to install it, but edX has it in the pip directory, so that's pretty nice. Pip install edX auth backends. If not, you could directly install it from the repository. But once you've installed it, you add it to the authentication backends in Django settings. You have to define a few more settings, and this is because of how this works with Python social auth. So you have to define maybe what was that OAuth secret, what was that OAuth client ID, maybe what's that URL. Oh, sorry, I'll go very quick. So then you also have to define a couple of URLs, right, for login and for logout. And the main points are this. This is pretty simple, but just so you know that there is another repository called Auth Backends, which you can use right out of the box to build any kind of additional dashboard or separate website that you still want to use to take advantage of edX's data. There's an asterisk on OpenID Connect because there are a couple of ways to do it, and OpenID Connect is not the only way to supplement OAuth with those user credentials, but this is how it's currently being done. So that is all. Thank you.
All right. I think that's all of our lightning sessions today. Does anybody have any questions for any of our speakers? Or wait, do we have one more? No? Anybody have any questions for any of our speakers today? No. No questions. All right. Yes? No? Okay, I guess class is over. Have a good day. One more round of applause? All right. got Teach First.
Hello.
Take it away.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm Philippa. I work for an organisation, a charity from the UK called Teach First. I'll say a little bit more about that in a short time. But first of all, I'm going to introduce you to William. So William is a mentee of mine from a place in England called Sheffield, which some of you may know. William is lots of things, so he's an absolutely brilliant historian. He is very passionate about 1950s musicals, in particular Calamity Jane, and I've seen him play Calamity Jane in a theatre production in Sheffield. He was excellent. And he's also one of almost 4 million, so 3.7 million young people who live in poverty in England and Wales today, right now. So, and because William's parents earn below average income, he is far less likely to receive a quality education than his more wealthy counterparts. So as a direct result of the fact that he lives in poverty, William has only a 33% chance, which is about half as good a chance as average, of achieving the 5 GCSE qualifications that he needs to continue to further or higher education, or to secure some employment that we would consider to be stable for the future. So because of this, William, and importantly, any children that William has, so the direct kind of following generation 2, is most likely to find that they take on low-paid jobs, that they live in poverty, and therefore are far more likely to develop chronic illnesses. And ultimately, William and his children, sorry, this is grim, but it's true, will die on average 7 years sooner than their more wealthy contemporaries as a result of this. So it's a direct result of the fact he lives in poverty, and that means he gets a substandard education, he will die. So it might come as a surprise, but in 21st century Britain, education really is a matter of life and death. And at Teach First, you may, if you're from America, you may have heard of Teach for America. We're the British equivalent. So we work every day to try and break this cycle of inequality and poverty to achieve our ultimate vision, which you can see here, which is that no child's educational success, therefore their life chances, is dictated by, or determined by how much their parents earn. So how do we do this? Well, clearly, poverty and education inequality are massive ingrained problems which require massive, complicated interventions from lots of people, not just from us. But at Teach First, by far the most direct and the most critical intervention that we make is through our graduate traineeship programme. So that is a 2-year, highly intensive, on-the-job training program. And what we do is we try and attract the brightest, most brilliant graduates, and we train them to become life-changing teachers and leaders in the classrooms and the schools of people like William. And the idea is that we train them as quickly as possible to develop the knowledge and the skills that they need to lead transformative change, first in the classroom, and then on a school level through school leadership, and ultimately on a kind of, we hope, a societal or a systemic level. So just quickly so that you can understand what I'm talking about, this is the Teach First programme, or as kind of still is. So this is how it would have looked if you joined us last year in the 2016 cohort. As you can see, the first thing that you do is attend a 6-week residential, which we call Summer Institute, over the summer holidays. And that is a highly intensive residential stint of training in teacher and leadership skills, knowledge and skills, I should say. And that's delivered both by experts from Teach First and by our partner universities from the UK, and we partner with some of the highest rated universities in the country. From September, so just after your 6 weeks training, you're straight into a Teach First eligible school and you're teaching full time. You're responsible for a class, either early years, primary or secondary level. And then over the next 2 years, you're basically being a teacher, and you're, in the first year, working with your university tutor to get your QTS, your qualified teacher status. And if you have time, you continue to engage with the 2-year Teach First programme, and we currently deliver that through face-to-face workshops, which we deliver during the evening or at weekends, if you can find the time, because obviously this schedule is very busy. I should note that if you joined the programme last year, you would have joined a programme that was doing very well. So the Teach First training programme had just been rated as outstanding by Ofsted. 99% of the teachers that we train received either outstanding or good status when they got their QTS or their qualified teacher status at the end of year 1. And also, basically since 2003, if you joined last year, you would have been part of a movement of around 7,000 teachers who'd impacted positively on the lives of over 1 million children. So we were doing really well. and it's important that I make that point. That's what my line manager said. We're doing very well, but we want to do even better. And this is where I came in. So I come in to Teach First, and the big question is, how on earth do we better achieve our organizational vision through, improving our program? So basically what we needed was a new learning strategy. And like all good strategies, our strategy had to be problem-based. So you need to have a problem in order to understand what the solutions are going to be. So the big question that was asked to me was, what are the blockers which stand in the way of maximizing the speed and the depth of our progress towards our vision through our program? And after some significant research and analysis, it turned out that there were two main blockers, barriers to success, to maximizing our impact through our program. And the first was largely practical. So it's a question of access. So in order to be able to eradicate education inequality in the UK, we need to be able to place teachers and deliver our program in where poverty is most pervasive. Now, when we first started, that meant urban centres, so predominantly London, and then we spread to places like Manchester and Birmingham. But by 2016, in part because of our own success in those areas, research increasingly showed that the areas that we needed to access, where the pockets of poverty were our so-called areas of greatest need, were increasingly rural, isolated, and coastal communities. So blocker number one was all about access and expansion. We needed to be able to design and deliver a programme that was of equal quality in somewhere like the Isle of Wight or rural Norfolk, somewhere isolated, as much as it was of a quality in London or Manchester. And the existing model just wasn't scalable. And in 2016, we were already feeling the effects of this. So in 2016, participants, if you'd been placed in London as a participant, you'd have had access to far more expertise, far more learning experiences than you would if you had been placed in the Isle of Wight. So And those also, our statistics showed that those who were placed in those areas developed quicker and had impact on their pupils sooner than those in isolated areas. So basically our program wasn't equal, it wasn't having equal impact, and that wasn't acceptable. As I've already hinted, the problem of access wasn't just about like rural, isolated, coastal, it was actually a problem for all of our participants. So when you're learning on the job, there is only so much time that you can dedicate in the evenings and at weekends to attending physically, attending workshops, lectures, this kind of thing. And I did some research and it showed that on average our learners were probably only accessing about 15 hours of learning per year delivered by Teach First, which is less than 2 days of learning per year. So it simply, it wasn't good enough. So improving access both for current but also prospective, more dispersed participants was big problem number one. Big problem number two, and this is where we get to Bloom's taxonomy, is about pedagogy, or specifically in our case, andragogy. So where strategic blocker was all about the practicalities, strategic blocker one was all about the practicalities. Number two was all about the pedagogy, the andragogy, the quality and the impact of learning design, basically. And at Teach First, the programme is made up of knowledge and skills development, and as such, and for other reasons, we design our curriculum around the basic principles of Bloom's taxonomy. So if you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, you'll be familiar with the fact that it's gone through lots of iterations since it was first introduced in the 1950s, mostly in response to the emerging field of cognitive science or neuroscience, which has developed since the 50s. So here's basically a modern day, this is my version of Bloom's, but it's a typical modern day version of Bloom's with some additional pink bits, which I'll describe in a minute. But this is the model that we use at Teach First currently. And as you can see, within Bloom's model, knowledge is the fuel, if you like, which then powers the rest of the learning process. So just to summarise, just to bring you up to speed on what this actually means, cognitive science has shaped Bloom's original taxonomy in two main ways. So first, it's elevated the status of knowledge. So whereas before, for Bloom, knowledge was kind of like just a small precursor that you got over to get to higher level learning. Now, according to cognitive science, the more that people know about something, the more specialised that knowledge is, and the more embedded it is in their long-term as opposed to short-term memory, the better they learn, basically, the better they're then able to apply it, to test it, to understand it, and to create, and to develop from it. So basically, in short, cognitive science tells us, and this is a quote, I've not written it down, but I'll read it to you, optimised learning happens when people can meaningfully apply in their specific context what they know and understand very well in the long term. And this is basically the principle that we adhere to at Teach First. Because, I'm going to explain the pink bits now. So because we also teach adults at Teach First, as well as adhering to Bloom's, we also adhere to the principles of andragogy, and that's what you can see here in pink. So that basically means that to ensure that it impacts as quickly and deeply as possible on our specific types of learners, we design our content according to 4 key kind of experiences, we call them, or methodologies. So the first is that all learning should be self-directed or learner-led. So adult learners, in-depth research shows this very consistently, that adult learners prefer to have control over what, when, and how they learn. It should also respond to prior experience, so we're not teaching kids here, we're not going from scratch, and we need to kind of reflect that and acknowledge that in the learning experiences that we design. Okay. Thirdly, and this is really important, adults are more motivated than anybody else to learn only when it's very quickly and very directly applicable to their real-life context. So they're only going to turn up if they can think, well, by the end of this, I'm going to get something out of it that I can use tomorrow, and that's particularly true of our teachers and leaders on the program. So we also need to make sure that learning experiences are adequately differentiated and context-specific to ensure that relevance and direct applicability. Finally, adult learning experiences should also be as much as possible social or peer-to-peer. So rather than passively receiving information from a sage on the stage, which I appreciate is a bit ironic given that I'm just talking at you, but I shouldn't be doing this, basically. Adults prefer to generate their own learning through exploration, through conversation, and through kind of collaborative discovery with other learners. So as a result, in the adult learning scenario, and you can see this at the bottom there, the instructor role should ideally shift from that of teacher to that of coach and facilitator of these conversations. So this is the dream that we aspire to at Teach First, but within a model where learning is face-to-face, delivered in evenings and weekends, there's only so much that we can do. There's only so close that we could get to that ideal. So this is a kind of demonstration of where we were at in the previous model. So basically, just to explain to you, when time is limited, you end up dedicating most of your teaching time, your contact time with your students, to the delivery of knowledge or content. And because contact time with your learners is limited, when you do have that contact time, you dedicate breadth over depth, because I can't start going into lots of detail, because you might be a primary teacher or a secondary teacher or an early years teacher, and you might be from a rural location or you might be from an urban location. So I need to take the bigger picture in order to ensure it's relevant for you all, because I've got you in the room. And so basically, yeah, we had to prioritize breadth over depth, which meant that we lacked adequate differentiation of content. And a lack of differentiated content then has implications. So it means basically that you can't apply. It's not relevant directly to you, and so therefore it's harder to apply. So it's harder to transfer that knowledge into a set of skills. Basically, because we had very little time, we couldn't design a program of learning. So we had to design one-off learning events, because if you turned up to this one, we don't know whether you can get to the next one. So we designed in isolation, which is not ideal, because what that meant was we couldn't really afford the time and space for meaningful social learning, for drawing on learners' prior experience, to have the facilitator as coach rather than as instructor. And there were also very few opportunities for personalised or self-led learning. So, I mean, it wasn't all bad, of course. And as you can see from the green bits here, we were achieving some stuff. So we were getting across quite a lot of knowledge to our Summer Institute through our sessions. We always build in activities like recall activities or definitions of concepts and things which lead to remembering and understanding. And then in some cases, usually when we made the sessions far too long, we also built in opportunities for applying, practicing. So you might do a session on behaviour management and actually try out some drills in class to test those skills. So we were doing absolutely as much as we could within the confines of the programme, but of course, as I say, we want to do more to maximise our impact. So what do we do? Can you guess what the answer is? Basically, the solution that I came up with for Teach First was that we should move our programme gradually over to Open edX. I say that as if it was really straightforward. It actually took a lot of time and work. First, to identify the platform that would do more than just increase access to. So we didn't just want to put our resources online. We didn't just want to record our teachers and put videos up. We wanted actually to have a platform that could develop the pedagogy that we use, that we could actually make the learning experience more powerful. And after lots of research, we decided that that tool, for lots of reasons, was Open edX. It also took a lot of time to convince the organization that online learning was a positive thing. So, I mean, I'm sure you can sympathize with a lot of people at Teach First who said that their experience of online learning was that it was all of these things. So it was impersonal, it was not engaging, it was about saving money, it wasn't about making learning better. So basically the feeling was that online learning was going to detract from rather than add to the learning process. So I had to try and convince them otherwise. And just a word of warning that takes an awful long time if that's the stage that you're at. And I thought I'd just share some top tips on what worked for me in terms of convincing the leadership team at Teach First this was the way to go. So the first tip I would give you is that you need to very clearly define what online learning means for your organization. So in my case, it was very much about communicating that this is about enriching the learning process, not about saving money or replacing teachers with videos. You also need to be absolutely crystal clear about your motivations. So again, it's about pedagogy. It's not about cash, basically. And then thirdly, and probably most importantly, hence the star, is that you need to align the move to online with your broader strategic aims. So there'll be loads of people in your organization who couldn't give two hoots about online learning. But everybody in your organization probably is interested in innovative techniques to help to achieve your vision, your goals, more quickly and more adequately. And that's really where I found the way in with Teach First. So it was about aligning my blended learning strategy with the broader organizational vision and goals. So thankfully I was able to convince the senior leadership team, and we have now, well, we've just delivered, and it's still running, our first course on Open edX. So what I thought I would do, just for the next 10 minutes or so, is just to briefly take you through the kind of before and after. So the course that I'm talking about here is one called Moving into Middle Leadership, which is a really important course for Teach First. It's basically the course that we offer to teachers who have shown that they're making impact in the classroom on pupils, and we want to support them to be able to start to make impact on a school level, hence middle leadership. It's a really popular course, but basically people couldn't get access to it. So first of all, in terms of access in the old world, this was a huge problem. There was massive demand for this course, but because of the expertise required to deliver it and because of budgetary limitations, we could only afford to host it annually in 2 locations, which meant that basically it was inaccessible to most of our participants. Those who did manage to access the course often didn't complete it. So it's 3 3-hour sessions over 3 weekends. Often they could attend 1 and 2 or whatever, but very few, I think it was about 25%, could only attend and complete all 3 sections of the course, which was a massive problem for us. The value for money rating on this particular course was not good. By moving the course online, we were able to offer it to all learners across all local areas, including in our new areas of greatest need in isolated locations. The course still has live sessions. You can see some footage from up there. But by delivering them virtually and by scheduling them flexibly with learners able to choose when they attend, attendance has been maximised, and we're doing really well there. So that's the access thing. But let's now look at how this kind of new course has helped us to achieve blooms more effectively. So before in the face-to-face course, as I say, the course was 9 hours long, 3 separate weekend sessions of 3 hours each. In the new course, the online course is structured across 4 modules, which last about 3 months. We're about to finish the first round. And it's made up of kind of defined, very clear weekly tasks, some core, some extension. And we communicate these both through the platform and through push notifications, which Proversity supported us to develop, which have been really popular. So we push those out through the app. And yeah, so basically I was trying to think about the best way to summarize this. And basically, I think fundamentally by delivering the course over a prolonged period of time, we've been able to achieve an awful lot. So first of all, we've been able to embed an adequate quantity of knowledge, and we've been able to embed that in the long-term memory. And that knowledge has been suitably differentiated according to lots of different contexts. So before in the face-to-face course, there was no differentiation. There were a few handouts available with a kind of primary and specific focus. In the online course, the new course, all of the content is differentiated. So we run 2 separate cohorts, one for primary, one for secondary. They are led by our primary head teacher who's active in a Teach First school and our secondary head teacher who's active in a Teach First school. We would never have been able to get those teachers if they weren't able to deliver this virtually. So that's fantastic. The quality there has gone through the roof. Within those phase groups, so all of the content, all of the discussions, everything is phase-specific differentiated. And then we also sub-differentiate. So within those groups, we use the Teams function to bring together people from the same phase who are facing similar challenges or want to learn similar things. And we allow them to do that organically. So we've got this group that have come together to discuss what middle leadership looks like specifically in a primary school in a rural setting, for example. So we've got this really very specific, specialized knowledge, which means, of course, that it is much more relevant and applicable, and it translates much more quickly and much more deeply and meaningfully into a real-life set of skills, and that's what we're trying to get to. A longer course length also means that we support learning to be social or peer-to-peer, so people have the time and the space to develop real, qualitative, trusting relationships. We put them together into groups, or I think they opted into groups, and they sustain those groups over a period of 3 months. So we see like real, impactful learning relationships developing over time. And in turn, through supporting social and peer-to-peer learning and exploration, we're able to ensure that learners have the time and space to draw on their prior experience. And we also, of course, all importantly, transfer the role of the tutor to facilitator and coach. Right, so they're not delivering knowledge. That knowledge is developed through the learner's own exploration of the content. More learning time, this is really important for us for teacher development, but I think it's applicable also to lots of different contexts. But more learning time also means that we have much more time and space to try stuff out. And also, importantly, we're able to do it in different contexts. So our learners try out, for example, leadership conversations in the safe environment of the platform, but then also have the time and space to go and do that in real life, or to test their leadership skills in the classroom in real life. To capture that, to bring it back to the course, and to talk about it, to reflect, to develop, and then to go back. And that process of learning and trying and testing and coming back is really what is that ideal that we're looking for, and we've been able to achieve that in part through the platform. There is still some development to go, and I'll come to that later. But yeah, we're certainly much further on than we were before. A longer course also means that the content can be more adaptive and responsive. So, for example, we run these brilliant things called they're not live, but they're office hours. So every week by week basis, our learners can submit questions about the content that they've covered that week. And our tutors then, at the end of the week, review that content. You can see this here, actually. That's Geraldine doing an office hour up there. And they provide bespoke responses to all of those questions back by video, which our learners can then access at any point in time. So they're getting very specific, responsive help with their specific problems on a week-by-week basis. We also made it responsive in the sense that we've built in kind of checkpoints. So I think it's every 3 weeks there is a kind of open conversation using the discussion forums where learners can say where they're having particular problems or where they would like to explore in more depth. And we then shape the second half of the course based on what that feedback is. So this is far more responsive, far more bespoke, more differentiated, and therefore applicable than anything we've ever managed to achieve before. And also, of course, moving the course online meant that it became much more self-directed. So in the old course, you had a choice whether to take the course or not, but that was it. Whereas in this, you can choose what you learn, so you can, obviously fast forward through the content. You can delve into extension tasks or not. You can choose when you learn, with 90% of the course delivered asynchronously, not live. And then you also have control over how you learn, and our data shows that people like to learn in lots of different ways. Some of them like to work on their own, some like to work in groups, some listen to the podcast versions of the videos that we provide, some watch the videos, some prefer to read. It varies wildly, and I'm looking forward to collecting that data and kind of looking for some trends, but the variety there is absolutely key, and that's something else that we're able to deliver. So in summary, basically, I would argue that I think moving the course online has enabled us to deliver a kind of mastery of the subject in a way that we just couldn't face to face. So in part just by providing the time and space that learners need to take on and embed knowledge, and then to practice and then to analyze, they've basically been better able to develop through all stages of Bloom's and to achieve optimized learning. And I've just, as you can see here, I've just mapped out the different levels of Bloom's and made a list of the various different tools that we've used from the platform to achieve each of those different things. And I'm happy to share that afterwards if that would be helpful. In addition, just a quick note, because I think this is important, but as well as supporting us to overcome those two key barriers of access and andragogy or pedagogy, we've also noted a number of additional benefits of moving the course online, one of which the organisation is very happy with, is value for money. So, for example, by moving the course online, we have redirected all of our funding away from things like travel, subsistence, logistics, the time it takes to organise these things, pizza. We spend an absolute fortune on pizza to entice people to come. We don't buy pizza anymore. All of that money has been redirected to facilitation. So we can now pay Geraldine and Rachel to deliver more office hours and to co-design more content that's more specialised. So we've not saved money, but we redirect and have much better value for money as a result of moving online. Also, and this is a massive, massive area which is not really acknowledged by organisations as far as I can understand, as far as I've seen, from when I used to work at universities and at Teach First. In terms of value for money, one of the greatest benefits of this is that it's enabled us to tap into an untapped resource, and that is existing knowledge and expertise within the organisation. So, okay, cool. So basically, the ability to kind of mobilise and capture that existing experience. So, for example, we've got brilliant ambassadors, we call them, people who've been through the programme, who are brilliant middle leaders, and we've been able to grab them. We've got them in the videos. They've selected resources. They do live office hours. By being able to kind of mobilise that existing knowledge and expertise, we've tapped into a real resource that means that we get much better value for money, but also much better quality content and stuff. There's loads of other benefits. One is that we're doing much better at achieving our goal of building a real movement, a connected movement of people who know one another and work together and rely on one another, which is part of our organisational goal to create a movement for social change. So we're really kind of gluing people together. And we've also made our course, it seems, much more inclusive. So by moving it online, and this was in the Open University talk this morning, which was music to my ears. But yeah, by moving the course online, basically it just becomes more inclusive. So it's more appealing to non-traditional learners like working parents or people with disabilities. And that really helps us both to be more inclusive, because that's very important to us and it is one of our goals, but also to be much more competitive in an increasingly competitive market of teacher training. So it kind of helps us to stand out a little bit. So I've only got 5 more minutes, I think, from that. But just a few comments on like even better if. So where from Teach First experience we think Open edX needs to develop in order to help people like me to achieve like pedagogically the most powerful learning experiences that we can design. So it's doing really well, and it's been great, and particularly with the support of Proversity, we've been able to develop new stuff or to use third-party tools and drag them in to support what we need to do, but there is more that we can do. So these are just some tips from Teach First on where we need to develop. I think we need more social collaborative tools for small group work among specialised groups. So something like Teams is brilliant, but with more functionality. So, for example, with video functionality, so that people can actually kind of connect dynamically and independently. We also want more activities which support learning by doing, so the application and testing and honing of skills in the kind of safe classroom environment, but also related to that, tools which better connect the virtual and the real world. So, for example, once our teachers have tested their, behaviour management techniques within the safe confines of the course, we then want to send them out and have them test it in the classroom and to reflect on it. And at the moment, we're using third-party tools to do that, where they can actually video capture their practice, bring it back, reflect on it individually, comparatively, critically, and then learn from it. And so tools like that would be incredibly powerful. And you can see here also more tools which better develop creation skills. Virtual coaching and mentoring would be a blessing for us. So something beyond Skype, something where, again, you can share video footage of you in the classroom and get structured feedback on it, have conversations about it, develop over time. And then finally, the delivery of tools which support dynamic live sessions, so like virtual classrooms with whiteboards, screen sharing, document sharing, and breakout rooms. That's where we've had to go to third-party tools at the moment, but this could be much better embedded. So yeah, I could go on, but I guess my general point here is that in order to maximize the impact on learning, we need to, as a community, focus on learning science, on andragogy, on pedagogy, and to prioritize the development of tools which support the design of not just the improvement of access, but also the design of the most powerful possible learning experiences. And the answers are out there, like pedagogy, andragogy exists, it's developing all the time, we just need to connect those things together, I think. So back to William. Thanks to the great teachers who supported him at Teach First, William is now studying, against all the odds he's studying history at Sheffield University, one of the best universities in the UK. And we have every hope at Teach First that through leveraging the power of online learning that we can replicate this story more quickly and more widely in more areas than ever before. So yeah, I look forward to evaluating our first 2 courses, which will be over by July this year, and to sharing that with the rest of the community. Thank you.
We've got a few minutes for questions.
4 minutes.
I wonder, like, if you could put a few words to the. I wonder if you could put a few words, if you go one slide, to the free text response and recap.
The what, sorry? The free text response and recap. Oh, yes, so this has been developed by Proversity, so maybe Christian might know more. But basically it is, so we can ask a question, the learners can type in a response, and then you can grab all of the responses that you've put together and export them into one document if you want to kind of like collect together your learning in order to recap in the future. So I think the functionality is that it creates a PDF that you can then put in your portfolio, because our teachers need to develop portfolios. That's something else we need. So yeah, that's what it is.
So no assessment like from this free text response? It's just like for a portfolio?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Philippa. And I just think, there's a lot of people here that are maybe instructional designers and will face the similar challenges that you did in terms of communicating with your organization. And I'm just thinking, what from you've learnt now, what do you envisage that we as a community could do better to support teachers, to enable them, to give them the tools to go out there and speak to organizations on how they can move more things to online? Just wondering if you had any more thoughts on that.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we're thinking about at Teach First. It's like, how do we model this for the use of our participants in the classroom? And yeah, one of the challenges that they face is like managing that cultural change. I think, as I said in the talk, I think the biggest thing is just aligning it with broader organizational goals. So I went in at first just like super excited. It's like there is this thing and it's brilliant and it's going to do all of these things. But that it's too much detail, and so I guess supporting students to understand the need to align it with the vision of their organisation or their school or whatever it is is the greatest advice that I could give. But it's really important that we do, as I say, model this through our teachers, with our teachers, so that they can then take this forward too. And that's one of the biggest barriers that they'll face. One that we'll support them with, yeah.
And that's one more.
Yeah, could you tell us a little bit more about the open response and free text kind of engagement that you got from your adult learners, especially?
Yeah, so engagement with it. Yeah, so the activities, the engagement with the activities has just been fantastic. What we have found is that we built in a weekly system where you would complete the activities, including like the input on text responses, and that the tutors would review all of them and then just give general feedback. So it's kind of policed in a way. But actually what we find is that the participants are talking to one another, answering one another's questions, continuing the conversation from those questions in their teams, their smaller groups. So actually the engagement has been just fantastic. And so I don't understand yet how far that is about the fact that they feel they're expected to do that and the fact that they're actually drawn to do it, but the quality and the type of responses that we're getting and the different areas in which these conversations are happening suggest that actually the motivation is great. Yeah, but that's one of the specific questions that we've got for our kind of post-course evaluation, to try and understand what the motivations were. But the engagement has been brilliant, yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you, everybody. So my name is Furkan Naziri. I'm a partner at a firm called Extension Engine, and I've been with the company for about 10 years. I've actually been involved in Open edX since it was open sourced, actually since before it was open sourced in 2013. In my role at Extension Engine, I'm responsible for setting client expectations, for overseeing the delivery teams, and ultimately for client success. I should point out that I'm not a software engineer, so actually I'm curious, is anybody in here a software engineer? All right, so you guys can't ask questions. This particular project, actually most of our projects at Extension Engine are innovative. They tend to be kind of the first time a university or institution has done something. This particular one is on what I call the frontier of innovation in online learning, in that it is, I believe, the first time that a university has offered an online degree that's fully delivered on Open edX. And so we went through a lot, as you'll see in this talk, to deliver on that. I've got about 25 minutes of remarks, and then we'll have some questions, except for from you two guys. Actually, out of curiosity, before I talk about this, one thing is, has anyone ever taken an online degree? Or did everyone here go to school in a residential campus? All right. Has anyone ever enrolled in an online class other than in a MOOC? So like an actual degree, 4-credit online class? All right. Generally speaking, online, courses are offered in, Sakai, Blackboard, Moodle. Sometimes they're in Canvas, but it's generally a very different experience than what you've experienced if you're in a MOOC like Open edX or Coursera. Let me quickly get the advertisement out of the way. So Extension Engine creates custom learning experiences, everything from strategy to instructional design. We do software development, customizations. We do hosting and support. And we even do learner acquisition, which is actually acquiring, doing the digital marketing to acquire students for an online program. We help organizations develop kind of best-in-class online learning by blending courses and platform into something that's really unique. And we focus on projects where the problem is really hard, the pedagogy is important, and the program is strategic to the organization. We've also got deep expertise in Open edX. I think we've completed 30-odd Open edX projects over the last couple of years. And so I'm going to talk about one of those today. Before we jump into that, this is actually a process we do at Extension Engine where we talk about the target learner, we talk about learning objectives, pedagogy, and then the program. So I guess for this talk, the target learner. You'll find this really interesting if one or more of these describes you. Number one is you're planning to offer an online degree program and haven't selected a platform. Number two is actually probably most relevant here, which is you have Open edX as a supported platform for MOOCs or maybe for a flipped classroom, like supporting a residential class. But you're looking for additional use cases. And most people rule out a full credit degree course as a use case, but I'm here to tell you that that actually is a viable opportunity for Open edX. The third one is you like Open edX, but there is a gap between what it does out of the box and your requirements. And so we'll talk about how to close those gaps. In terms of the learning objectives, after this talk, I'm hoping that you'll be able to have an understanding of the reasons why you might want to use Open edX for an online degree program. I'll show you an example of how we did that at Notre Dame. And you'll get a sense of what it's like to create a unified custom learning experience that wraps actually Open edX with many other tools. And finally, I want to share some lessons learned from that experience so that hopefully you can avoid some of the mistakes that we made should you decide to pursue this strategy for your institution. And there'll be time for some questions at the end. So I'll start with actually a little bit of background on the project. I think it's important to understand the context, the people for that matter, before jumping into the project specifics, which I will get into. Actually, Notre Dame, who's heard of Notre Dame? Anyone heard of Notre Dame? All right. Well, for those of you who haven't, the University of Notre Dame is a private Catholic research university located in Indiana, which is in the Midwestern part of the U.S. The school was founded in 1842, which makes it brand new by Spanish standards. It is, however, one of our oldest institutions. It currently teaches about 12,000 graduate and undergraduate students across 8 different colleges. Notre Dame is considered an elite institution in the U.S. I think it's ranked number 15 by U.S. News and World Reports as an undergraduate program. It has many of its individual degrees and master degrees are in the top 5, top 10. About 20% of the students that apply to the program are admitted so it's highly selective. And its endowment is more than 10 billion US dollars. I know this sounds crazy here in Europe, but undergraduate tuition at Notre Dame costs $50,000 per year. In 2014, Notre Dame joined edX as its 35th charter member and has since produced about 10 MOOCs that have run on edX quite successfully. So it's with this in mind that Notre Dame decided to launch a new degree program. And the thing to bear in mind is very few of the elite institutions in the US offer fully online degrees. And there's a lot of reasons that they don't, and a lot of obstacles, I should say, that they have to overcome in order to do that. And Notre Dame is very much in this, where they had to successfully overcome these obstacles and to really convey the institutional history, the institutional culture in the program. In terms of the degree, it's actually an online master's degree in data science. This is actually a summary of the actual mission statement that we wrote down in the very first meetings with Notre Dame. And I think it encapsulates what we plan to do and actually have done with the program. It frames the opportunity first as there being more data created in the past 3 years than in all of prior human history. The vision for the program is to foster analytical precision and creative problem solving with an emphasis on applied projects and case studies. So it really drove the pedagogy by having small cohorts doing case-based project work. The program characteristics is the key point to emphasize on this slide. Notre Dame wanted to use digital to improve the student learning outcomes and not just to expand market reach or to experiment with online. And this is the feature that really drove the custom platform, is we needed to apply the institutional background, the pedagogical requirements, and to create that custom learning experience that the student have, which the goal was and is to drive better outcomes. And lastly, the graduates should be T-shaped with a strong computational and quantitative background. At Notre Dame, there's a chief academic digital officer, tenured professor by the name Elliot Visconsi. In addition to this role, Elliot is also a professor in English literature, as well as an associate professor in the law school. In addition to his academic responsibilities, he has been a founder of a software-based commercial venture. And I actually looked up and I read his bio, and it actually says here, in his capacity as Chief Academic Digital Officer, Elliot works at the nexus of strategy, fundraising, faculty development, curriculum policy, intellectual property, financial modeling, and pedagogy on a variety of university-wide programs. So when I first met Elliot, I thought, geez, this is a really odd background, right, for somebody who's leading the charge on the first online degree program at a university. But after working with him and his team, I found that it's exactly the depth and breadth of experience that's required to drive real innovation in academia. And looking back, I can say that Elliot was the perfect visionary to conceive, launch, and overcome all the obstacles that we found in our way in launching this program. A little bit more about the program. So as I mentioned, it's the first fully online master's degree for Notre Dame. I also believe this is the first fully online degree program that's been offered on OpenEdX. Okay, no, has anyone heard of another one? Because I haven't. We've actually asked around, so I'd be curious if someone does. The program is also important that it reflect the values and brand, for that matter, as well as the tradition. It can't feel generic. Initially, the program is focusing on a small cohort of students. Unlike a traditional OPM vendor, the online program management, where scale is both the means and the end, here the focus is on quality first, and then after achieving that, scale. And lastly, this is an important part of it. Notre Dame is collaborating with AT&T in a very deep way. Things like employees of AT&T are enrolled in the program. There are numerous case studies and data sets that provided in partnership with AT&T. And of course, AT&T is helping fund the development of the program. In terms of the curriculum, there are 13 online courses delivered over 21 months. The curriculum is designed for mid-career professionals. So it actually starts out the first semester is half-time. At kickoff, the students come together on the Notre Dame campus. And there are actually 2 separate immersion programs, experiences in the middle of the program. And during the development of the course platform as well as the material, there's a tremendous amount of faculty and peer interaction. In fact, I think, worked with more than a dozen faculty. So how did Notre Dame come to the decision to develop an online program using Open edX? The first is that they had chosen data science as the program, but it turns out while the data science is new, it's incredibly competitive landscape. There are more than 20, I think it's now 30 online only degrees that you can get from actually very esteemed institutions, including like Berkeley, and others. There are, I think, multiple of that are offering residential data science programs. And because of the historical stuff that I mentioned and this competitive landscape, it was incredibly important that the platform and the experience be differentiated. Someone mentioned to me that a platform demo for an online course is the new campus tour that students use to select between going to this university or that university. The other thing that was really important is Notre Dame, because they were a charter member of edX, they developed MOOCs, they had hired staff on campus, instructional designers, video production, and others to produce online courses, and they wanted to use those resources as part of this online program, so they didn't want to completely outsource it. They also wanted to take advantage of the resources of AT&T in that partnership, so it was important that be included. And most importantly, Notre Dame wanted to retain academic control over the entire process. And so as a result, the decision was to do a custom learning experience, and that drove a lot of key functionality. And this is the last piece of background. So the key functionality or requirements for the program, so it's 2 buckets. On the left are the things that you would generally require of an online degree program. And then on the right, there are some things that were unique to Notre Dame and specifically to this particular data science program. And I think if you look at it, the list on the left is kind of what you'd expect, right? There's synchronous and asynchronous learning. You have formative and summative testing, lots of calendaring integration, lots of SIS integration. And on the right, I think there are a couple of surprises. First and foremost was an outstanding and consistent learner and instructor experience. As you'd expect, there are lots of programming tools. We wanted to have an auto-grading feature, so we would reduce the amount of time required for grading by faculty and TAs. And as you'll see in a moment, there was a tremendous amount of integration points, both with on-campus systems, but also with third-party systems. So that was a long wind-up to sort of describing like how we came to this solution and why that solution is what it is. The platform is a combination of Open edX, a custom application, and a bunch of third-party systems that are integrated together. And combined, we call it Nexus. The project scope, so it had 3 work streams. The first one is the technology platform, Nexus. The second one was the design and production of 13 courses that comprised the program, as well as 2 zero-credit, like edumercial marketing things that we did, one of which ran on edX.org. And the third one was digital marketing and enrollment and student services to launch the program. In terms of schedule, the project took less than a year from starting to the first students being enrolled in the classes. It costs much less, about a third, about 25 to 30% of the cost of a traditional OPM arrangement with revenue sharing. And it involved a tremendous amount of folks. I think I mentioned earlier, 14 faculty from 3 different colleges were involved in the development of the program. Now, if you remember back to those requirements that we had, a lot of that, if you're familiar with Open edX, it doesn't sound like Open edX, right? Like synchronous learning, all those gradebook features that we mentioned, the programming tools, calendaring, SIS integration. So theoretically, I think Notre Dame could have chosen between any existing LMS like Blackboard, Canvas, Sakai, and others. But in reality, there were only 2 options that were heavily considered. The first one was Sakai, which is the LMS that's used for the residential programs at Notre Dame. And the second was Open edX, which Notre Dame was familiar with being a charter member of the edX consortium. Ultimately, Open edX was selected as the best starting point for a lot of the user experience and the student experience piece of things. And what we ended up having to do with the custom app and with the third-party solutions with Nexus is we essentially extended the Open edX platform using a lot of LTI integrations, and then we added a bunch of third-party applications which are sort of wrapped in a custom application, and together that comprises the student experience for the platform. So this diagram shows kind of the super high-level architecture of how things are set up. So on the left is the custom application. We call it the learner dashboard, and it has about a bunch of different third-party integrations that I'll talk about in a minute. On the right is Open edX, and that has another half dozen third-party product integrations. And in the courses, the 13 courses, they actually sit on top of this combined platform, and that constitutes what the learner experience is. So if we just kind of go around it, starting on the left, so CAS, Shibboleth, that's the authentication system that's used, and I'll actually talk a little more deeply about this in a minute because the learner gets set up with a network ID, which provides full access to the tools and courses in which they're enrolled. edX is used as the identity provider for both the LMS and the learner dashboard, and this in turn provides the learner with federated authentication into the courses and tools which they're authorized for. And this is actually a huge piece of it because you can see there's more than like a dozen different tools, and if a student had to manage their own authentication with all these tools, it would turn into a nightmare. So that's a key part of the platform fundamentally enabling is the user authentication. The next one on the list is Mattermost. Anyone familiar with Mattermost? So it's a open sourced cross-platform enterprise communication solution. Best way to think about it is an open source version of Slack. So it has channels and discussions, and we use that for all of the student collaboration aspects of the platform. We actually did leave on the discussion threads within Open edX, although those are kind of discouraged, and we're trying to drive folks into Mattermost for most of the discussions. Next one is Zoom. It's a video conferencing tool that Notre Dame actually had in place, and they use that with all of their students for all their classes. Sometimes they do flipped classrooms. So every student already has a Zoom ID, and it's already federated into their Notre Dame credentials. And so we wanted to integrate that within the platform. And it's actually a really great tool for doing live video. It's super simple, and students never get lost in it. The third one here that I'll talk about is Digi or Digication. And this is actually a super cool tool. I think it should be part of every degree program, whether it's online or offline. And what it is an e-portfolio. So as the students go through the course material, they have an opportunity to take pieces of their course material and to add that to Digi. And it creates a clickable resume. So you can like double click down. So if it says, I have skills using R, you can actually double click, go into Digication, and a student can show to a future employer like projects that they actually did using R. So you get more than just like your transcript that says, I took analytics course at Notre Dame and I got a B. You actually have examples of work that you've done that is portable with you beyond your graduation. They also, the platform also integrates Google Calendar, which is used for scheduling of all the events and event management, and the entire Google suite, so all the Docs, Drive, and all those tools are integrated as part of the dashboard. On the right, we had to add a bunch of things to Open edX. The first one that probably really important in this is proctoring. So we used a tool called ProctorTrack by Verificient. It's one of the only automated remote proctoring solution that continuously verifies the identity of online test takers while detecting and deterring academic misconduct. We integrated that using LTI. We use RStudio, which is a free open source development environment built to make using R efficient and effective. R is the main programming language that's used in the data science program, and this is a required tool for the program. And Vocarium actually has a LTI integration. It's also used in the Open edX. Jupyter Notebook is a web application that allows you to create and share documents that contain live code, equations, visualizations, and explanatory text. It's also part of the Vocarium LTI integration. Qualtrics, which is a really cool survey and polling tool that Notre Dame actually uses throughout the organization. So we actually used the really robust Qualtrics API to connect that into the platform. And then Vocarium, there are a lot of group-based projects within the platform, and so within the degree, and so we used the Vocarium toolset for easy deployment, peer review, and team projects. And then the last tool on here, I think, is DataCamp, and this is actually a supplemental tool, so it's not for grading. It's not a graded tool. So I think this one is currently with the direct link out, but plans to have LTI integration later. And this is for students that need some brush up on Python and other tools that are used in the class. I mentioned this, but a really important part was students go through the CAS system, which is used to authenticate their identity. That gets them into the student dashboard, and then from the student dashboard, you can link away to any of these tools, including Open edX that we mentioned. The student the learner dashboard piece of the platform this is a screenshot here with some things highlighted. There are a number of key use cases that we focused on this. By far, the most important use case was to view the timeline of upcoming events and then provide one-click access via an API to assignments, exams, synchronous sessions, anything that the student is supposed to do is put front and center on this, and it's sort of a Facebook-style stream of events and comments and other things that the student has access to. There's also a calendar view, and then the second key use case was posting, viewing, and reading articles that both students as well as faculty could post. Faculty could actually pin, and TAs can pin certain posts and their responses to them. The third key use case was chat. Student peers and faculty. It also includes their status, whether they're online or offline. And then the fourth key use case is actually having a toolbar. Because there's so many tools that are used within the program, having a single toolbar, which is the place to go. And one of the things I mentioned earlier is this idea of plugging in third-party tools. And this is the suite that we have at the get-go. But the idea is that over the 5-7 year lifetime of this program and platform, that these tools are going to change. So this is a great place where we can have that single dashboard for it. And the last thing is analytics. So each student has kind of an analytics view, and the faculty do as well. We designed it for mobile. So the mobile use case is actually just a subset of the full dashboard. So it's the timeline is the critical one, chat, and the articles is the key thing there. In terms of Open edX, the theme we changed, obviously, to look like Notre Dame. We got rid of the horizontal nav bar, which I don't know why it exists, and so it's now embedded in the left, so you have primary, secondary, and tertiary nav. And then we created one really cool X block. We call it nested X blocks, so it's basically an X block you can put in, and then you can put in additional X blocks within that and drag and drop them around. So it's a really cool way to control how the content is presented to the learner in a way that is really readable and easy to digest. And then actually the heaviest customizations we did to Open edX were around the grade book. So we had to do things like add manual grading for discussions, participation, extra credit. There's group projects, so we had to be able to upload from Vocarium like the group projects, like which students are on which projects to do the grading. And you have to remember with edX.org, like grading is not a really heavily focused on thing, but here, grading is hugely important. So we had to allow a lot of things that didn't make sense in the MOOC. We had to change. So for example, we had to create grades so that students could look at them relative to current points instead of summative points, because otherwise it looks like you're failing the exam until you get to the very end. We had to look at it, we created a special view so you could look at your grade by points or by percents. We created some custom data exports so you could get the grades out of Open edX into Banner, which is the SIS system. And my favorite one is we had to add a feature where you could include entries in the gradebook to hundredths place. So let me finish with some lessons learned. Probably the biggest lesson learned, which I actually didn't put on here, is that this is Notre Dame's first fully online degree program. So a big part of it was learning and teaching Notre Dame faculty about how to actually do an online degree. On this list, Pedagogy First, I think, is an interesting one. Most online degree programs, they pick an LMS and then they pour all their content into it, and you kind of get the best you can. Here we took an approach of defining what we wanted to do, the pedagogy, target learner, and then making the system do that. And I think we proved that that works. We also didn't fall into the trap, which I know we at Extension Engine have done before, of trying to do everything with Open edX. So we let Open edX do the things that it's really good at, and then we added third-party tools and a custom app to do the things that were best not done there. I couldn't underestimate the people side of it, and having a real strong visionary who can overcome hurdles at the institution. This idea of experimenting, I think, is really important. So having tools, trying approaches, and iterating and then changing them is a key part of this platform. And the last thing I'd say is testing early and testing often is absolutely critical. I can't, even describing the amount of effort we had to go through to get test users for the system, to test all these different systems fully up from front to back is really important. And, we allowed, I think, 3 months to get test users, and we should have allowed more. The platform is obviously open source around the Open edX stuff. The Notre Dame currently owns the aspect of it that's custom, but they're actually open to sharing that with a small number of partners. So if anybody's actually interested in that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or direct you to Elliot if that's of interest to anybody. And I do have some time for questions if anybody's interested in that. And if nobody has any questions, I will go cold call my 2 software engineers who I know have lots of questions that I can't answer. Yes.
First of all, Furkan, that was brilliant, and congratulations to you and team. That was really good to see just how many things you can integrate, and not only that, just where you were able to also take the edX side of things as well. I'm just curious, if you had to do the project all over again, what would you do differently?
I think actually it's a really interesting piece of it because one of the things that we really pushed, and actually Notre Dame was hugely behind this, was learner experience first. And everything started with the learner experience, learning objectives, learning outcomes. How do we get students through this material in the most efficient way with mastery? And then how do we make things like the digication, right, where that's value to the student, right? Like the university doesn't get any value out of it, the faculty don't get any value out of it. That's something where I'm, as a student, building this portfolio, and I can go get a job based off of that more easily. So we came in this super heavy with a focus on the learner experience. And it was kind of interesting because towards the students are being enrolled this fall, so we're like in the last final steps of it, and so we started to involve like TAs and faculty on sort of the operational side of things, and it turns out, and it's totally backwards in how institutions normally do this. They normally start with faculty first, like how to minimize time to produce a course, and optimize the faculty time, and then the student gets what they get. But we've kind of flipped that around, and I think we were super successful. In some ways, I think we were almost too successful. And if I could go back, I would have, like for example, like a last thing we were working on, or last month was creating like a faculty dashboard for curating like the discussion forums. Like, we just thought, well, hey, they'll just be in like another student, and we're like, no, they want to add like curation and pin things and stuff like that. So I think probably what people normally do, we didn't do as much of around the faculty experience. I think actually in terms of the platform, I think it's really, it worked out really well. The client had a very focused budget, and so we were able to deliver on that. And I think this solution is both really, it's one of the best in the world in terms of the learner experience. Like if you've ever taken, no one's taken it, but if you ever use Blackboard, it's a terrible experience if you're a student. Like students hate it. Moodle's not much better. Canvas is okay. But when you compare that to like Open edX, it's like night and day. And so students have taken these MOOC classes and they're kind of used to it, and they're used to their iPhone, and then they go on Blackboard and they're like, really? I'm paying $50,000 a year for this? And so this experience actually delivers that level.
What was the total cost to the university?
The total cost to the university, it includes a bunch of internal resources and as well as third parties like us. So it's on the order of $1.5 to $2 million, which if you compare that to an OPM vendor, it's normally 4 or 5 times that.
$2 million for one course.
For one degree program.
Sorry, I'm going to have to ask a question. What made you finally decide on edX between that and Sekai? And follow up on that is, what aspect of edX stood in your way the most when you're trying to change it into a platform that you can offer an online degree program on?
I think the learner experience was the main differentiator between Sakai and Open edX. You know, Sakai is kind of what you'd expect. It's really a document management system. So, you know, faculty can put things in there. It's got an awesome grade book, but the student experience is not great. And so, combining Open edX with the third-party services in an integrated fashion was a better student experience, and that was the key differentiator for it. In terms of like what made it the hardest, by far the gradebook. The gradebook, Open edX was designed, you know, it's really, the thing it is best at, by far, hands down, better than anything else in the world, is running edX.org. And so edX.org doesn't, you know, really care about grading. And so that's the thing that we had to make the most changes to. Great. Well, thank you very much.
have your attention, please? Hi. So I've met some of you at today's Mobile Birds of Feather. If you have questions anytime after this, I'll be at the booth downstairs, the assembler booth downstairs. You can just come up and ask me directly, depending on what time is available, how private it is. So my name is Jem Ohm. I have been a product director, mobile developer, mobile designer since 2009. I now work with Assembler, and I am the lead mobile person at Assembler. We do turnkey solutions for organizations of all kinds, universities, businesses. We help you launch web and mobile instances of your learning platforms. So without further ado, today I'm going to be talking to you about how we've evolved our offering this year and how we launch quickly and beautifully on iOS and Android. Oh, animations. The rockets symbolize how elegant and fast our solutions have become. That's not true, but. So our agenda today is to basically talk through our story, give you a little idea of how we've done it, how you can do it. If you are a partner, if you're a provider like us, this may inspire you. This has enabled us to move towards more open source contributions and being more active in the community. And so take notes, consider it for yourselves. If you are somebody who's looking to add mobile to your own site, maybe consider us as a provider. So some of you have never seen the edX mobile app. So this is for you. This is our little demo about, kind of what the app looks like. When your students log in, they will see a list of the courses they're enrolled in. Here we just have one demo course on here. This is the course we use to train our clients on course authoring. So by default, we have some options on the course overview, access to videos, assignments, quizzes, discussion, handouts, announcements. We've had requests to add more site-wide or course-specific pieces there, to remove them, and we do that. This is the course outline. So if you've ever made a course on edX, you're familiar with the idea of you can add text, you can add like HTML, you can add video, you can add weird video choices like YouTube, and then we direct you to YouTube because it is a little more effort to bring it directly into the app, so why not piggyback? But sometimes we do bring those solutions in. This is discussions. So just like on the web version, students can interact with each other, they can create topics, they can respond to topics, ask questions, answer questions. This is me saying I'm from the West Coast of the United States. Course navigation is you can go from the high level into the different units, or you can go next and previous. Video is a big in-demand piece. That's the piece that is most offline friendly on mobile. So if you use one of our recommended solutions for mobile videos, then your students will be able to download the videos and store them for offline viewing at a later time. That's one of the benefits of the mobile apps, is being able to access those at any time. So it's just showing you little pieces. The main navigation is this menu, typical menu you've seen on a lot of apps like LinkedIn and other apps. It's common on Android and iPhone, so it works as a similar design choice. We also allow students to choose Wi-Fi only. So if they don't want to, say, be downloading videos over cellular, you can say, don't do that. That's the one main overview settings toggle. Registration. It is required for app stores to have a terms of use, and whether or not you distribute on the App Store, you should have a terms of use, and I'm sure you do. So that is standard on our apps. That's it. So this is an example of branding. This is not the default edX branding. This is an example of our simplified branding flow, which is give us one or two primary colors, you can give us more. Give us a logo, you can give us more. And honestly, the only thing we need to launch your app is a square logo. That's it. And you're good. So how have we evolved our offering? Did I skip a slide? Oh, okay, yeah, I wanted to more clearly speak to this. I'm going to be going through from 3 main steps in how we've evolved this year. We started with a very, very open-ended free-form process that we still use for a lot of enterprise requests, and that looks something like, I want something. What is it that you want? Here's an example. I want something. You know, that slow, very iterative process. That's our open-ended flow. Then we move to the standardized one, which has like a little more formulaic. And then we go to what I'm calling the one-button beta, which is give me 1 to 30 things. Here's your app. Okay. So our open-ended free-form process with mobile went something like this, and still goes something like this for discussions. Every time we are ready to provide you with something, we give you screenshots of the whole app so that you can see the look and feel quickly. We send you downloads to play with for iOS and Android so you can interact with them and see how it's working with your choices on the course content side. And then we demo it to you, and we talk through it, and we walk through it with you. So this is how we evolved our mobile offering to kind of discover, hey, what's working, what's not working, and now we have a more standard idea of that. From our first few customers doing this process, we did learn some things. So this year, one of my primary goals was to enable more access to the Open edX platform. On web, we have been creating a more standard offering where it's just easy to get you up and running if you don't need a lot of customization, so you have something now. You can always change it later, but you have something now. So we want that for mobile too, where it's just easy, get it now, we handle the tech, it's there. So that's kind of the flow I'm going through here. So with open-ended freeform, we started trying to standardize. So as it was really fluid, we learned that our customers really actually only wanted a few branding options. We didn't get really customer requests of, oh, here's a PSD, we want it to look exactly like this, we want this animation. We didn't get a lot of that. We got, oh, how about you just like add our logo and we like this color? Which was really surprising because I expected more requests than that. Most of our customers have been happy with simple choices. We also discovered through this iterative process that it would be smarter if we asked for a lot of things up front: marketing requests, branding decisions, tech choices, account access. So we started developing some standard for that. Now, after that, we moved towards a more standardized flow, and we used that for quite a few clients. So we handed off 3 surveys. We said, hey, here's a design survey with branding choices. Please talk it over with a branding team member and get it back to us. And if you have comments, questions, discuss them with us. So we have a standard design survey for visual branding choices. So these are 3 main categories: design survey, copy survey, technical survey. And we ask our clients to hand it off to the appropriate team member for that, bring it back to us, get it to us soon. So once we get these 3 things, we launch the app. We send a download for final review for iOS. We send a download for final review for Android. And we use the marketing materials to prep the App Store listings so you don't have to. We also, you have control to do that. And App Store is optional. Oh, through the open-ended approach, we discovered some snags in delivery timelines and promises and such. So our standardized workflow involved a more standard approach to that, which we still use. And this is basically batched feedback. Here's the thing, please give us your feedback in one batch, talk to your team, get it to us. Then we have a meeting where we discuss it. We discuss your needs, we prioritize them, and we have a customer success lead who leads that discussion. And the customer success lead brings in a developer usually for like 30 minutes of a call to just finalize that. And our goal generally is to agree on a scope of work that can be completed in 10 days for the next iteration. So every iteration we try to do a pretty tight, here's a new version, here's a new version, here's a new version, in a way that works with enterprise timelines, because sometimes you guys are slow. It's just, works with everyone. Unexpected details. We also developed a standardized approach to analytics and more standard customer processes around discovery projects, estimating new features, specialist advice, and co-sponsorship packages. As we've used this standardized workflow, because it was a pretty sharp transition to this, we learned a few things. We learned that we want fallbacks for everything. We want default colors, default images, default randomly generated things, default everything. And we also need to communicate clearly on deadlines, divisions of responsibility, and deliverables. And we learned that we really, really prefer our customers to be very involved and responsive and communicating with other team members and bringing them in. So this is my baby that I'm very proud of, and this is our automated solution that we developed this year. Basically, in a nutshell, it is continuous delivery, continuous integration, and separation of client-specific code from generic code. So to run this, I literally do git branch -b branch name, git push. That's it, and then this happens. So it's pretty cool. It works really straight up in the coding workflow. It's very simple. Continuous delivery. So for those who don't know, continuous delivery is the idea of always be sending out downloads. So whenever a new change is made on the Open edX platform, I automatically pull it in and produce a distribution to our QA team. So every change generates a QA build. And then we have custom delivery timelines for beta and production. So beta, generally, we've been doing like every couple of weeks. Production once a month. We'd like to bring that even tighter. Continuous integration is the idea of, okay, so there's a QA team, and that's great, but we don't want to manually test everything every time. So continuous integration is the automated test suite. So making sure that before any build goes out, it runs our automated test suite. And then there's the passive. It goes to the QA team. They can say, no, don't ship that, and let us know. Yeah. One of the things I really wanted to happen with this one-button solution was to solve the idea of what do we do when client code diverges from the edX platform. So the one-button beta solves this as best as we could find. By separating client assets from the Open edX code base, and ensuring that there is some separation of assets right now, but separating every choice from the main code base, we can be constantly pulling in the latest code base and the latest contributions. So thanks to this system, it's become more affordable and wise for us to always be on master. Because if we're always on master, then then our automated merge system works. We can just be pulling in the latest, putting things on top of it, always contributing against master. And because we're always on master, the small fixes and the upgrades and the large upgrades that we negotiate with our enterprise and co-sponsorship programs can all just go on that. It's hard to explain how tight that feedback loop is becoming, but we're still realizing all the benefits of this, which is why this slide is a little complicated, but basically, releasing consistently is making us a better open source contributor. Questions? Go for it. Oh, could you guys hear me okay? Okay. Oh, yeah.
I think in the past you guys were using CocoaPods or something for theming. Is that
Yeah.
still an approach that you use, or is that, yeah, so that's my first question.
Yes. So I actually did submit an upstream pull request to introduce this as a concept to the open source community. It was rejected. It's still available open source as a concept. There was a proof of concept saying, here's it abstracted as a CocoaPod. So yes, we are using CocoaPods for iOS. And then we use, what is it called? The one that starts with a G for Android. Yes, Gradle.
Cool. And is that part of this one button
Yes.
process? Yeah, it is. Okay.
Absolutely.
And
Because
then-
basically, then our script can just say, pull the latest CocoaPod, boom, boom. And it, yeah.
Oh yeah, and then my second comment is just that it seems like edX for their white label products and Proversity and you guys are all doing a very similar process for replacing client assets. So later, I'd love to talk about how we can collaborate on that and get everyone using a similar process. And
Are you Proversity?
I'm OpenCraft. I'm Braden. We've actually interacted.
You
before.
missed our birds of feather.
Yes.
Shame on you. Come by my table.
Yeah,
Later, after.
great.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Thanks for the talk. So I was wondering, you ended your talk with saying that it's best to always keep your stuff on master, like edX is master, I think you mean. So how do you deal with clients of yours that are running on a certain release version? Are these always compatible with the master branch of the app?
Are you talking about edX platform now? Are you talking about the web backend?
So I'm talking about, you were probably talking about like the edX app master branch, right?
Branches, yeah.
And then I'm talking about the interaction between that and the edX platform master branch that the edX platform your clients are using then should be running on. Or they could also be running on a different branch.
Yeah. So the answer is that that could become problematic. We've been talking about that a lot because it does raise fears. Like, hey, if there's a huge change between Ficus and Ginkgo, and then what happens? Like, what does that start looking like? And the answer is I don't think it's that complicated. The API layer is what we care about, so we can keep the old API layer and keep the new one, or retain some flags, or connect to the old. There's just ways to do it, but it might become a little bit of an issue. We can also ignore certain changes until a certain date. Just because we're pulling from master, we haven't had to ignore anything yet because we can just, if it's bad and it's broken in QA, we can push up an upstream change and just be like, oh, it's working now. But yeah, we haven't had any headaches from that. We probably will, and then we'll have a better answer for that question.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Sorry. Go for it. Yeah.
I don't know if you can tell us, but how do you sign the iOS apps with the one push button? Because that's like a tricky thing to do.
Okay. Yes, there are a lot of ways to sign, right? So when we're releasing to an app store, we use Fastlane and Match. When we're releasing to enterprise, so far our current solution has been most of them have some kind of mobile team, and we literally hand them the code base. Here you go. So they always have the latest code base. And then they sign it themselves. We haven't done, because there are so many ways to sign, that it kind of needs to be a request by request basis for anything more complicated than that.
Are there any other interesting customizations that you guys have seen, or apart from the theming that is required by every organization, are there any interesting customizations of the mobile app that you can share?
Yeah, so honestly, the mobile app's really simple. Like it's just not very complicated. So I guess the answer to that is no. We've had customizations, but they haven't really been that complex. They're pretty simple. In terms of, we do have requests. So we have we are working on we have a co-sponsorship thing happening now around localization. We've had, I don't really know what I'm allowed to share beyond that. I know that I'm looking at my manager. But yeah, I would say our requests have largely been around X blocks. So X blocks are currently technically web code, and the collaborative force of mobile development in the Open edX community is moving towards, we just agreed we're moving towards making sure that X blocks have a native experience and a web experience. So I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of that, because we have been getting a lot of requests on the X blocks. Like, please support them better. Because basically they'll a lot of them, in terms of everything working on mobile, the answer is sometimes we just link out to the mobile web experience for some pieces, and that's frustrating. We don't want that to happen. We want it all to be smooth and cohesive, and so our requests are more around, let's make the experience of this custom piece, like dragging and dropping things, great on mobile, and that's through Xbox, which some people don't know what that is. That is a library of plug-and-play pieces for polls and surveys and any custom graphical interface piece.
Can you talk about the progress bar and the instructor dashboard pages that we've?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Essentially, the perception of the disparity between web.
Okay. The technical implementation details of that I didn't find very interesting. So.
Sure,
but it
fair
is
enough,
an interesting piece to probably a lot of you, which is that. So one of our clients wanted. They said, "Hey, we want more feature parity. You don't have the course progress. You don't have this other thing, and we got those custom made on our website." And I said, "Okay, well, we'll make them." So we did that. We added those in. We shortcutted it, and we basically load them as internal web views because they don't need a custom mobile experience, but they could have one. I'd love to iterate on that. That would be a more interesting feature. Yeah.
You said you have an analytics link up. Do you give different customers different analytics solutions?
Yes. So we have two so that's a little complicated. Some of our customers like free. And so free is, our default free offering is Google Analytics. And then some of our customers don't like free. They want something custom. So what our default offering for that is Segment. And that's standard. Segment is standard on the Open edX platform. Google Analytics is something we're going to push up. It is standard on the web, but not so much on mobile. So the Segment offering, how many people here have heard of Segment? Okay. Of the people who have heard of Segment, was it popular for you for a large organization? Yeah, okay. So it basically goes like this. What Segment does is it allows us to just say, what analytics platform do you want to use? And then the list that Segment supports is hundreds. So your tool is probably on that list. So by default, we support hundreds of tools. And then if you really, really want that, the reason enterprise doesn't like Segment is it costs more and more money per user. So it's like paying for 2 analytics tools. But it's way faster. So basically, you say, I want to try out this app, I want to see how users are enjoying it, you can try it out for however long a time and get immediate analytics feedback on a shorter turnaround. And then if you like it, then we can do a direct integration to your analytics tool. So that's our flow. So one thing that people ask, a commonly asked question, is why do I need a native mobile app? Who has that question? Cool. Oh, you do. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to point at you. One person here does. Somebody here does. So the general answer to that is you don't need one. You also don't need open edX. You don't need a learning solution. You don't, like, what's need? There's a strong business and organizational case for having a native app. That includes the fact that industry-wide, there's a huge difference in engagement on native versus web. So industry-wide across mobile and web experiences, in the United States, you'll see, I think the number is now close to like, users spend 90%. It was 80% a few years ago, but it's been increasing. Users spend like a disproportionate amount of time on the native experiences of things versus the web equivalent of the native experience. And that's just an industry-wide trend. The numbers also seem to be increasing internationally, but are not nowhere near as high as that. But it is important, and one thing that has also been had a pretty visceral impact on people has been the question, what about your younger users? Are they going to be regularly using your web interface from their phones or from the desktop? Are they? So I guess those are kind of the reasons. So one of the reasons that increased engagement on native happens is you have your phone with you 24/7, you can carry it around with you, it's just more accessible. And the native experience is just way faster. So your students can get through the courses more, they're more likely to engage with the courses. The actual measurements on that will be company specific. Did that answer questions? Any outstanding questions on those?
I guess one other question is, have you thought about how to customize layouts and not just assets for clients without having to fork the code and so on?
Yes. We haven't shipped that. So I've been, so I was talking with one of our designers about this, and she and I were talking about, okay, well, what if we did it this way, and this way? So there are a couple approaches to it. We haven't really made a clear decision, but we do want to do that. It would be great to have more layout choices. It hasn't been requested at all. It was requested for one international use case to a specific country with the idea of we want to do an experience more engaging to them, but it wasn't really about layout. It was about it's always about a specific feature or tool. It's not about the overall look. I do think that it would be cool to do a entire visual overhaul, but it's pretty usable, so. Yeah.
Are there any interesting implementations that you've seen which are native and mobile first, right? Because in general, what we've seen people talk about is the mobile being just as a support to the web deployment of Open edX. So are there any interesting entities or organizations doing native and mobile first and not really leveraging web that much?
Well, from a design perspective, at our Birds of a Feather, I just learned that Open edX designs mobile first. So it's designed to the mobile experience first and how it looks for a mobile user. So even if the web is what's coded first, the thought is first, how could this be on mobile? So I guess that partially answers your question. Are you could you maybe clarify further if I didn't quite nail what you're asking?
No, I mean, generally, generally mobile only comes in as a support, right? Like it's when people need to take their courses on the go. It's not, people generally don't think, at least from what I've seen discussed at a conference like this, is people generally see it as a support to the web application. And so I am curious if, it's great that OpenEdX thinks mobile first, and I imagine that's true for most of the new Xblocks that are being developed, which is fantastic.
Okay.
But I was just curious about whether organizations that you work with are mobile first, or is it mostly web supported by mobile?
Well, so the fact is you can't, it has to be web first, because it isn't designed to be packaged solely in an app. It's designed to be pulled from the web. So the web has to exist for the native to even to exist. So if you were to cut anything off, it would be the thing, you can't get rid of the thing that's needed. If we had a request to make it an entirely mobile package that's only mobile and doesn't rely on web, like we could do that, but you'd have to probably shrink your course size by a lot. Yeah. Time. We have a big blue booth downstairs. Okay.
Just to answer that last question, there's a guy here at the conference from McKinsey Peak. His name is Abhimanyu, and find him because they have a mobile-only edX learning experience, and it's also heavily themed and customized. It's still built on the same app, but you'll want to check it out for sure. So
do they not even use the web? They don't even use the web with their students at all?
They don't allow their learners to access the desktop version.
Yeah, we don't have anyone doing that, but apparently it does exist.
I can help you track them down later. We're working closely with them as well.
Yeah. It can absolutely be done. We just don't share the website. Yeah. All right.
maybe say
Should we start? Okay. Hello, everyone. This talk is about the theming capabilities built into OpenEDX. We will look at both past and present technologies that allow us to theme our instances. So my name is Matjaž Gregoric, and I am a software developer at OpenCraft. First, what is theming? The basic function of theming is changing how your site looks and feels. You are usually most often only concerned with theming the end user facing parts of the system. For example, for edX, that would be the LMS. But sometimes you may also want to theme the backend, like the edX Studio. Theming allows you to change colors, images, text, and it also lets you modify the layout. A simple layout modification would be injecting some links into the header or the footer, and a more complex layout modification could completely shuffle things around, either by injecting some complex CSS rules or just by changing the structure of your HTML. And why would you want to theme your site? The most common motivation is branding. Most often when you install a new OpenEDX instance, you will want to use your own company's logo instead of the stock OpenEDX one. And you may also want to change the default edX blue to some color from your company's own color palette. If you have existing corporate sites, you may want to make the LMS look similar to the corporate site so that when users move from one system to another, the experience is more consistent. Or you may just want to make your site look different from the competition. Another reason is theming for legal reasons. In this case, you are not concerned about the looks, but about the content. For example, the theming system in OpenEDX lets you change the text on the terms of service and honor code pages, and it also lets you replace the default copyright notice in the footer with your own text if the default doesn't work for you. Finally, theming lets you do functional changes. For example, you can add custom links into the header or the footer, or you can replace the login button with a link to a third-party single sign-on solution. And another common reason to theme your site is to make it more responsive so that it works better on mobile devices. The default OpenEDX theme has been improved in this responsiveness area a bit, but it's still far from perfect. Now we look how the theming system in OpenEDX came to be. Before there was any officially supported system built in, the only way to theme your site was to fork the edX platform repository and make changes inline. That's very nice because it lets you change anything, but it's a maintenance nightmare. OpenEDX moves really fast, and every time you upgrade to a new release, you will have to rebase your changes, you will run into lots of code conflicts, and basically have a very bad time. So forking is not a viable solution for theming. And the team at Stanford were very much aware of that. So before they launched their edX site, they had to come up with a solution for theming. And that's how the first theming system built into OpenEDX came to be. It was contributed in GitHub pull request number 57. And it has since been known as the Stanford theming system. It would let you override static content such as images, templates, Django or Meko templates, and it would let you add custom static pages. Stanford developed a sample theme that they put on GitHub, and the common workflow when you were developing a new theme was that you would fork this repository and make your changes and develop your custom theme on top of the sample theme. This is what the sample theme looked like. The nice thing about Stanford theming was that it was the first officially supported theming system that was built into edX. It would let you overwrite any static file and any Django or Meko template. It also had SES support built in, so when you issue the paver command to generate your assets, it would build your SES together with the SES in edX platform. And the most common modifications were easy to make, but more complex things were trickier. Stanford theming had some issues. One of them was not being able to overwrite arbitrary SES files. And while overriding arbitrary files is usually not a great idea, it's sometimes the simplest solution that doesn't involve copying large amounts of CSS. Stanford theming had no support for Studio. It was LMS only. And because the Stanford was a bit in a hurry to rush their site, so the implementation was a bit hackish in some areas. Like there were areas in the code where it would say, if using Stanford theming, inject this content, otherwise inject this. And Stanford theming was a single theme per instance only. And this was a problem for the solutions team, which had a task to build multi-tenancy into OpenEdX. And they had to add some limited support for theming so that each microsite could be themed differently. And so they developed their own system, which was known as the microsite theming system. It would let you add custom additional CSS per microsite. It would let you overwrite certain images, and it would also let you overwrite templates, all of this per microsite. The obvious advantage of microsite theming was that it supported multi-tenancy. So if you looked at the site from one domain, it looked different than if you looked at it from another domain. But it could only override specific images, and it had no SES support. Both microsite theming and Stanford theming coexisted for a while, but you could not use them at the same time. You had to pick one or the other. So if you needed multi-tenancy, you would typically go with microsite theming, and if not, you would probably use Stanford. And that's how we come to comprehensive theming, which merges this multi-tenancy with the basic approach of Stanford theming. Comprehensive theming was first released in Dogwood and has seen some significant improvements in Eucalyptus. It is similar to Stanford theming, but it's more consistent, and the implementation is much cleaner. And like we said, it supports multi-tenancy. In addition to the LMS, it also supports the Studio and e-commerce. It lets you overwrite any static file and any Django or Meko template, just like Stanford, but it also lets you overwrite any SES file or partial. This is nice because it makes all three aspects of theming, static files, templates, and SES, very consistent. Now, while I was preparing for this talk, I found this repository on the edX GitHub account. It contains a sample theme for the LMS and e-commerce, and it seems to serve a similar purpose as the sample Stanford theme we saw before, but I don't remember ever seeing it publicly announced, so I'm not sure what the status of it is. But it looks like this. As you can see, there are areas where you're supposed to replace the default content with your own. Let's look at some examples. This is a very simple theme. It changes the logo, the color of the button, the background image on the homepage, and that's about it. This one is similar. Custom logo, custom colors, images, but not much else. This one is similar again, except that the background of the header is dark, which means that you also have to change the color of the text, because otherwise it's not very visible on dark background. And we found that that's currently not as simple to do as it could have been. And I'll talk about this a bit more later. Now, this theme wasn't built by OpenCraft, but I included it here because it looks nice, and I think it was built on the sample theme that we saw earlier because the structure of the header looks very similar. And this is an example of a theme that doesn't look anything like the default edX theme. Now that we've learned what comprehensive theming can do, let's talk about some best practices that we try to stick to at OpenCraft. The first one is just to try to keep your theme small. The smaller the theme is, the easier it will be to upgrade to a new release. The second thing is always prefer CSS changes over template overrides, because we found that template overrides are the worst. Templates change all the time, and every time you upgrade to a new release, you have to go through each template, figure out what has changed upstream, merge your changes back, and it takes a long time, and I'm sure nobody enjoys doing that. That said, you should still try to keep CSS small, because even if you have huge amounts of CSS, that still tends to break the layout when you upgrade. But at least it only breaks the look. It will not start producing server errors. And it's usually easier to debug and fix. Next thing is to try to use the built-in SES variables if possible. There are quite a lot of SES variables already built into edX platform. Some work better than the others, but you should try it first, and if it works, just stick to it, because it's less likely to break when you upgrade. And there are some potential improvements that I think would make theming easier, especially from the maintenance perspective. The first is the ability to overwrite named blocks in Django or Mako templates. Currently, you cannot overwrite like a single block from a template. You have to copy the whole thing and then maintain it through releases. And one example would be changing the login button in the header with a link to a third-party SSO solution. Now, the login button is neatly wrapped in this navigation sign-in block, but unfortunately there's no way to overwrite just this block. You have to copy the entire template. And solutions for this problem exist. There's a Django package called Django Overextends that lets you overwrite and extend the overridden template at the same time, which is basically what we need here. And I actually think that this is built into Django 1.9 out of the box. Unfortunately, simply upgrading to Django 1.9 won't solve things for edX platform because, first of all, we use Meko. We don't use a lot of standard Django templates. And second, we also use dynamic template lookups, so there will probably have to be some custom code involved. And once we have the ability to override specific blocks, we should try to use more of them. It's still not a good idea to go overriding blocks all over the place, but it's still better than overriding entire templates. The other thing I mentioned a bit earlier is improving the built-in SAS variables. There are already a lot of variables, but not all of them work consistently. Some don't work at all. Some are overridden later below in the default OpenEDX style sheet. So when you try to change the color of some buttons, for example, you have to copy the CSS and replace the hard-coded colors with your desired value. Another example I mentioned earlier is changing just the color of the text in the header. Because we have very nice SAS variables that allow you to change the background color of the header or the footer. You set them to your desired color and it just works. But there's nothing like that for the color of the text. So if you're changing the color to dark, you have to do a lot of extra work just to change the text. In conclusion, we've seen that comprehensive theming has evolved from quick and dirty solutions into a pretty decent theming system. It has come a long way, but there are still areas where it could use some improvement. And being able to override chunks of templates would be one of the most important upgrades, I believe. And until we have that, and also after we have that, please try to keep template overrides to a minimum. Now at OpenCraft, we will be closely following further development of theming. I hope we will be able to contribute some of our own ideas, both in terms of feedback and code, and I would like to welcome the community to do the same. So we can discuss these things on the mailing list and on Slack. And that's all for me. Thank you very much. And we have time for questions or comments, suggestions. Yes, please.
First of all, thank you for your presentation. It was really informative. At Edrock, we still use the Stanford theming, but I would like to know a little bit more about the blocks and overrides that are available with the new comprehensive theming. So you mentioned that HTML template blocks are not yet available, right? Templates blocks override. So you still have, okay.
Yes.
So what about the SAS overrides? How this have been developed? So I still haven't found. I haven't looked really well into the documentation, but I would like to. Okay. So I would like to hear from you about how many overrides are possible. What are there? I mean, are there any missing SAS overrides that?
SAS variables.
No, not just variables. I mean SAS.
Overriding
for the specific class. Can I override the specific class in the SAS?
You can override a specific class, yes, but you can add your custom CSS to the bottom of the default styles, and you can.
No, can I replace a complete partial? Is that supported?
You can replace a complete partial, yes.
So I remove the edX, not just like patching it until I...
Yeah, it works very similar to template overrides. If you name it, if you give it the same name as in edX platform and put it in the same place, it will use your version instead of the...
So, and that was not supported in the Stanford theming, right?
Yeah, right. That was not supported
Thank you.
in Stanford, yes.
That's just a SAS feature. That's not like the edX.
Yeah, so at Stanford, so we're actually in the process right now of switching over from Stanford theming, putting that to rest, and switching over to comp theming. And one of the things that's held us up was the use of blocks. We leveraged those Mako blocks a lot. What we've actually found that allowed us to not have to essentially make that a non-issue is instead of using blocks, just moving those into fragments. So instead of defining a Mako block, simply moving that into to a partial HTML file, and then we can override that at will. Have you guys looked into doing that?
No, not really, because I would have to see the code. I'm not really sure how that
So
solves
like
the problem.
literally instead of having a Mako block and then overriding that, you just move the contents of that block into an HTML file. So then
Yeah,
you can
but
shadow it just like anything else.
That would need to happen in the edX platform repository.
Sure, but I mean that's the follow-up. That then allows us to then
Yeah.
completely move away from this, and I think that's the overarching thing that then needs the follow-up work for the edX platform to be changed is then moving specific blocks into or specific areas into separate files instead of having these these massive aggregate template files.
That could work, but we would end up with a massive amount of templates if we put each chunk into a separate template. So it's an interesting solution, but I would prefer to see template overrides.
Sure.
Hi, Julio, also from Stanford, and I'm the one that created pull request 57. So we actually have a couple things that we're currently doing now. So what you can do is in Mako and Django, you can inherit a file, and then you don't actually change anything except redefine the same block that you want to override, and that gives you block overriding. So you say inherit main, because if you look at the other things, they inherit main and then they make changes, but don't actually replace any of the content on main, like the rest of it.
You still need the content in the overridden file, right?
The overridden file needs to have the block. So if it has a name block, you can say inherit from that template, and then you redefine the block, and it just swaps out the block and leaves the rest as it is. So you can do that. That does exist and it does work. We do that. Another one is you can put optional includes in your templates on platform, and with the comp theming, what that does is any theme that has this template defined, it'll take it, and if it doesn't, it just ignores it. And on platform, it's just an injection, which means it's very low risk for conflicts, and even if there are, you want that. So it's an easy conflict to resolve. So that's another one to consider for those kinds of situations. And then, yeah, in the CSS, you covered that. So,
yeah, thank you very much for both the comments and for creating pull request number 57.
But I think you're talking about override at a different level, right? You were talking about override just a specific section of an included block, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's a little bit different, whereas, Julio, you're talking about being able to include another block instead.
I said two things.
Right.
Both things are possible right now.
Overriding just part of a template, though?
Yes.
I mean, part of a block template? Yes. Okay.
So many of the things, the conversations around themes centers around making minimal changes to avoid future conflict. I mean, it seems like we have this artificial yoke around our necks, right? Is there any plan to fix that on a more permanent basis? And I've had a number of conversations already. You don't have this theming conflict or major issues as much as it is in edX, as it is in something like WordPress. You can easily flip out themes in and out without having problems, right? And you can define your templates. You can do everything else without having these major conflicts. So is there any intention to go towards that? This is not something that doesn't exist. It's already out there. And the question now is there any plans to adapt something like that versus having this yoke on your neck, always saying, hey, just make minimal changes because of future conflicts and just make these little changes and avoid the conflicts?
Yes, I think everyone would like to see a better solution, but it's a difficult problem, and we are working towards it. This morning we had an interesting discussion, and we decided on some future steps. So I'm sure we will see improvements. I'm just not sure how fast this will come.
The short answer is yes. You know, it's going to be more of a revolution than evolution.
So I think the future direction is much more toward React JSX based. So encapsulated components with CSS encapsulation that don't leak out. I mean, the problem with edX platform is much, much more complex than something like a WordPress, which essentially is a CMS which generates a static site, right? So I think just by nature of it is much harder to solve. You know, as far as global theming, I think the way that we're thinking of moving forward is using the Bootstrap framework, Bootstrap 4. So like we just punt that problem to Bootstrap. So you know, you don't end up with variable that gets overridden down the path or gets hard-coded. So the exact problem that you're talking about, like header background versus header text, like that's all stuff that Bootstrap solves. So we don't have to solve that problem. Where we solve the problem, and that addresses exactly like block element overrides. You know, there's no such thing as a block. Like your entire page is a component made of components made of components made of components. So at the smallest atomic level of a component, if you want to swat that component out, you know, go to town, because that's your problem. Or if you want to change, I think in your example it was like a navigation, specific like navigation within a specific part, right? In that case, you just say, okay, well, I have a navigation component that's made up of these subcomponents. Well, I want to keep some of the subcomponents and inject my own, then you know, I'll just make a new navigation parent that takes existing components, add my own component, remove other components, do whatever you want. They're just markup at the end of the day. Of course, new components, you have to create that new tag or new custom component. But yeah, I think we have a good way of separating out, even at the presentation layer, styling from the HTML. And then you know you have a whole other layer for behavior that then you can mix and match. That's kind of the long-term thing. It's a long ways from now, but that is like the direction that we're looking at. But like I said, that would be much more of a revolution. It's like a complete, like it has nothing to do with this, basically.
But I think in a previous conversation, the move towards Bootstrap, I think is on a roadmap for either the next release or the release after.
Partially, yeah. Partially. It'll be in like whatever dash B3 is the Bootstrap. But that's a very small step. Okay. Like, that's like good. That's a pretty low bar.
Any other questions?
You talked about SAS partials override.
Yes.
And to be honest, I've done the SAS files override and the SAS partials, but with the partials sometimes it breaks and it doesn't exactly render like you want it to be. Like it doesn't like you sometimes there's some other partial or some other file on the edX platform that is overriding the partial that you are overriding, and you end up with an override hell. And
yeah, I can imagine. I did not run into this particular problem, but
yeah.
So with that, I think you just have to be really cognizant of the build pipeline and make sure your stuff comes later than any of the edX stuff. And again, that is something with the new system we're going to simplify much more. You know, there's Django's not going to be involved in asset pipeline stuff for the new stuff anymore. It's all going to be node-based, which is a lot more clear what's going on, and it's much more declarative rather than, I think, Django compressor is what we use right now. So yeah, so it'll be much more of a like open source community standard rather than like this rat's nest of stuff that Django's not well suited to deal with.
Yeah, so I think one thing that I feel like missing from this. So we're focusing a lot on the styling and the look and the feel. But how do you guys handle custom data, custom logic that needs passed through? It's one thing to say don't fork the template, don't fork the CSS, but when you need to pass additional context, how much work do you do with that? And then what are your thoughts there?
Well, if we have to do it, we try to upstream our changes. So.
Right. So I mean, and I get it, right? And I think because this has come up in a couple of the talks, though.
Yes.
But the reality is that's just not possible for everyone. There are legitimate features that people build that are put behind feature flags, and then the response from edX is, we still don't want it though. And so I think this is where the idea, that balance between the idealism and the practicality of it is. Yeah. So I have some ideas. If people want to talk about it later, let me know.
Okay.
My short response to that would be to use Django's facility.
I mean, it sounds like potentially the cleanest way is to just have your own sub URL scheme, right? And you direct to that sub URL, and that's its own self-contained Django app, which still allows you to import stuff from Django LMS or wherever that you want. And then you create your own views, you control your own templates, you can even control your own asset pipeline or whatever for that, from that URL path down is like yours. That's I guess off the cuff, that's kind of my, I'm just trying to think of the most Django way of doing it.
Yeah, it still doesn't quite solve it. I mean, because it really is when you want to change something on, it's one thing to, I mean, if you're building something new, right, sure, put it on a new URL, separate as much as you can, but that still doesn't address what happens when you're trying to change something that exists. That's the unsolved problem.
Okay, so thank you very much. And